Hello, everyone, and welcome to Connected with Jen and Shannon, where storytelling meets transformation. I'm Shannon, a communications trainer and coach.
And I'm Jen, a speech language pathologist and academic. Here's where leaders in neuroscience, philosophy, spirituality, and the arts come together to share personal stories and powerful strategies for connection and reimagine what it means to be fully human. We're welcoming Dr. Nick Walker as our guest today. Nick has been a practitioner and teacher of Aikido for almost half a century. He holds a 7th degree black belt and serves as senior instructor at the Aiki Art Center Dojo in Berkeley, California. Dr. Walker is a professor of psychology and psychedelic studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies, where his work explores the edges and intersections of depth psychology, semantic psychology, consciousness expansion, and creativity. He also writes the urban fantasy webcomic Weird Luck. Such a cool guest.
So interesting. And we really get to the bottom of what the heck is embodiment?
I've always wondered how to define embodiment. I mean, we throw the term around. I'm sure we've talked about it here on the podcast. We hear people talk about embodiment, but what do we really mean? And he's talking about the difference between embodiment and mindful embodiment. You're going to really want to hear this. The other really cool thing that he was mentioning about body and mind is rather than separating the two, body and mind, he calls us one integrated body mind. Really revolutionary to me. And it makes all the difference in how we think about how we relate to ourselves and connect to others. And this other topic that he shared was the notion that our emotions are our stories and we can change them. They aren't necessarily the truth. So look, our emotions are important and they have been important to us in all the experiences we've had in our lives, but we can rewrite how we feel about different situations if we choose to. And again, imagine how that could change our relationship and our connection and communication with others.
So, right now, as you listen to this podcast, I want you to think to yourself, what am I embodying right now?
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We are so glad you're here.
Feeling lost in the noise of social media? Inspo cuts through the clutter, connecting you directly with real insights from real experts and industry leaders. It's a new social network dedicated to knowledge sharing, industry insights, and thought leadership. Get the latest from top minds in your field, or build your own thought leadership portfolio on Inspo. Already trusted by thousands of professionals worldwide, be part of the conversation and download Inspo Experts today on the App Store or visit www.inspo.expert.
Hello, we are welcoming Dr. Nick Walker. It is so great to see you. Nick, you are a 7th degree black belt in Aikido. You're a scholar of somatic psychology and depth psychology, which is such an amazing combination. We're interested to know how your Aikido practice has influenced your work as a scholar of psychology and vice versa.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yes, thank you for having me here. So the Aikido practice came first. I started practicing Aikido when I was 12. And so I just experienced and witnessed so many fascinating instances of human transformation, positive transformation through Aikido. And so from very early in my life, I was asking this question of what is it that is so transformative about playing around physically, changing how we move our bodies, changing what we do physically and how we interact with other bodies, and what is it that can make that psychologically transformative and life-changing. So that led me to somatic psychology. And once I got into the somatic psychology idea, I had to expand from there because I found that at the root of somatic psychology is this process of becoming conscious of what we do as bodies What do we do? What do we embody? How are we moving? How are we interacting? And this is depth psychology. Jung said the nature of the work of psychoanalysis, of depth psychology, was to make the unconscious conscious. And so when I saw that somatic psychology was itself about making the unconscious conscious, I said, okay, I need to get deeper into this depth psychology stuff.
So, Nick, this is fascinating, by the way. I find this so interesting. And you said you started with this question about transformation. So, did you get to any kind of answer all these years later? What is so transformative about incorporating the body into, say, healing?
We are bodies, is what I came to. That so much of how we do society and culture these days is based in a dualism. And so I'm always looking for non-dual thinking, non-dual approaches. And so the core dualism, I think, and I would say even the core human wound in the modern age, is the idea that we are separate somehow from our bodies and even from our brains. Weirdly enough, I hear people talk about my brain keeps doing this. Well, who's doing the talking? You know, my my body, my brain, my mind. Who am I talking to if the person I'm talking to is not a mind or a brain or a body? So there's the dualism is built into our language. And I do it myself because it sounds very strange and hard to follow if one doesn't do it to some degree. But when I have a conversation like this, where we're going deep, I hope, I like to really break down the language and say, well, how is the language shaping our perception of the world? And how is it reinforcing dualities that maybe are not serving us well? So uh, we tend to talk about ourselves as if we are some abstract, disembodied thing, and we ride around in bodies the way we ride around in cars. But that puts it backward, because in fact, what we are is bodies that think. Our minds arise from the body. Our brains, our minds develop, our cognitive capacities develop as our brains develop. And the brain is part of the body. It's not separate. The body's not like a vessel for a brain. The brain is intricately, intimately connected with the rest of the body as a living system, with, sharing blood and hormones and fluids, and interconnected with miles and miles of nerve cells. So, you know, I mean, uh, the dualism comes with this very sort of patriarchal mindset about control, and the idea that like the brain is the control center, and the brain tells the body what to do, like the boss telling the factory workers what to do, or the programmer telling the computer what to do, with such a capitalistic and patriarchal model. But it's not how biology really works. Biology is a lot sexier than that. And because it's a system, it's it's a two-way relationship, right? Yes, the brain is a central hub of cognition, but what we do with the rest of our bodies, how we move, how we interact, our sensory experiences, all of these things shape the brain. All of these things are what shape our neural pathways. So it is, in fact, a relationship of mutual shaping, or as the Buddhists say, dependent co-arising.
So I'm thinking about ourselves as babies, right? The only way our minds are developing is by how we are sensing the world through all of our senses.
Exactly.
What I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, right? And that is shaping my mind and how I'm doing. So, wow, Nick, this is
It is.
this is totally coming together for me, right? Like, how can those two things be separate when that's the state of the development of my mind was completely based on the way that I was sensing into the world with my body?
Beautiful. Exactly right. Yes.
Well, gosh, so much. But a lot of this I think about in my work. Well, what I try to do is people come to me with speeches and things, and I try to take their words and match it to their body. Right. So this nonverbal communication is kind of making up for maybe things that the words lack. So one of the things that I tell my clients is the body leads. The body leads. And when you're on stage or you're speaking in a group or in public, one of the ways to kind of work through that is to lead first with your body.
Again, to avoid dualism in the other direction, the brain is part of the body. The body doesn't do anything without the brain either. So it's, uh, I love this idea of leading, what do you lead with? And of course, part of what the brain does is, develop, that's, that is the nerve center, that is the hub, and that is where decisions happen about what to lead with, but it is connected with the rest of the body. And so I would even say, uh, were I coaching someone in that sort of, how to lead with something other than like figuring it out analytically, how to lead with something other than the verbal, I would say, let's talk about what we lead with. What part of yourself, what potential of your body or aspect of your body do you want to lead with? And again, it is, it is the brain making these decisions, but it's making these decisions informed by input from the entire body, and we, emotionally, I mean, our emotional states are, uh, are based on what we're feeling inside the rest of the body. And the brain is, an organ of interpretation, among other things, right? Interpreting what is happening, I'm feeling this thing, and how do I interpret that? What narrative am I forming around that? And so it is fascinating. We're constantly, you know, we're 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 spinning narratives all the time, but there's always some foundation in our bodily experience. Although for some people that may be the bodily experience of dissociation, that may be a bodily experience of disconnection, a bodily experience of not being able to feel uh, what a lot of what's happening. So all of that is part of the exciting range of human experience, right? As bodies. Um, One thing that I do in terms of how I talk about this stuff is I talk about humans as body minds. And so, rather than bodies, or, rather than doing the dualism of, you know, we are just bodies, or we are minds riding around in bodies, we are minds that own bodies, or that sort of nonsense, that we are body minds. And so in that sense, we can lean into the mental, the intellectual aspect of our being, and we can lean more into the physical aspect of our being in different situations, like where you would say, let the body lead. But remember it's a whole system. I love this term body mind, which, surfaced. It was, developed by someone named Ken Dichtwald way back in the 70s, somatic psychologist, late 60s, early 70s. I love this. Yeah, I love this. I love the term, and I love the concept of just looking at ourselves as these holistic systems where every part of the system is an interaction with every other part. And how do we adjust the system? And of course, part of what we do, part of what the brain does, part of the mind aspect of the whole body mind is that ability to make decisions and make choices about, as a system, what do I want to do? How do I want to modify, how do I want to modify what I do? How do I want to adjust the system? How do I want to change what I'm embodying here?
So, okay, I hear us talking about the body mind, which I love that language. I think I'm going to really try to start getting that to resonate in my own self, thinking that, speaking that way as one. It reminds me of kind of the idea of oneness, something we've talked about at Blue Sky, the idea that we are all the same. Something Sanjay, he says, I am the field for which the fear and the safety arise. Right. So he's saying, I am one, right? I am also the field. So I was just wondering, there's two things. Where does the field play into that? And then also, because the old language that I would talk about is this body, mind, and spirit. Okay. So now I love this idea of thinking about it more as one. Where does spirit come in to the
Oh,
equation?
beautiful question. So, fields. So there are so many different ways to use this term field, right? What is the field? What do we mean by it? And there are different fields, right? The field is where things are happening, essentially, right? People can talk about, you know, the field like an academic field or a field of work or a battlefield or, the energetic field or whatever. But it's where things are happening. And so in that sense, I mean, what is a person, right? What is what is an individual? We talk about everybody being one, but I can make my hand go like this just by deciding to do it. And I can't make your hand go like this by deciding to do it. So there's something to this individuality thing, right? So in that sense, what is my field of influence, right? What are the things that I can immediately affect? And what are the things that I have to go through various other fields, various other media to affect, right? I have, say, a field of embodiment in which I can make a gesture because I've decided to make a gesture. Oh, here we go, right? If I want you to do this, I have to shift from the field of embodiment here to the field of language and say, Shannon, could you please do this? Right. And so suddenly we're operating in a different field. So that's what gets sparked for me immediately when you bring up fields.
That totally makes sense to me. And it is broadening my understanding of, of this idea. So thank you so much. It's, paying attention to what's right there, and how the body mind interpret, right? So where does the spirit come in to that?
Ah, the spirit is such a fascinating thing. When I think of spirit, um, I think, uh, the spirit is, um in a sense, that which is necessarily mysterious, that which is necessarily unknowable in some way, and um that which is uh outside of uh outside of the material. And in a way, I mean, our cognitive processes are not outside the material, right? Because they're happening, there are neural connections, there's brain activity happening when we think, right? It's not, it's, no brain, no intellectual process occurs. So the intellectual and the physical are not separate, but there's something outside of that, I think, and that's what we call spirit, something outside of that we can somehow connect with and that can somehow inform us. And again, it's necessarily mysterious. And I am, to where I think, people, in some contexts, in some cultural contexts, the term mystic is used, right? Mystic is somebody who engages with the spirit because it's, they're engaging with the mystery, that which is to some extent not fully knowable and uh, can be experienced and talked about, maybe, but yet somehow our words can't encompass it. We can't contain it within the physical entirely. Um, and so I'm in an interesting position, of being uh, a scientist. I teach at California Institute of Integral Studies in the Bachelor of Science in Psychology program, and when it comes to the science, I'm kind of a hard ass about it, about the science thing. Like I don't I don't like pseudoscience. I don't like stuff that pretends to be scientific and isn't, I don't like, when people are trying to use things like, quantum physics and such to, um, or, you know, sort of dubious and disproven explanations about body and mind and such. I don't like when that stuff is, people are trying to pass that stuff off as scientific. But I'm a mystic as well. I do, so much of my life is devoted to uh to connection, what you might call a connection with spirit, to connecting with something that's mysterious and not fully knowable. And uh I don't see a contradiction. I see it again to fields, right? What is the field of science? If something can be proven or disproven with science, then that's its proper realm. And we shouldn't be believing in something that can be scientifically disproven. So, for instance, you take a theory, in somatic psychology about, you know, this this particular, this particular bodily function occurs. um, we can look at that clinically and say, well, either the function actually occurs and actually affects the brain in this way, or it doesn't. But what about, say, the concept of the archetype in Jungian psychology? You can't prove or disprove the existence of an archetype, right? You can't, like, what is an archetype? Is it uh, a pattern that recurs in human cultures and human thoughts because it's been passed down culturally? Is it a pattern that recurs because it has some deeper existence in some collective unconscious that we can't fully know, some deeper existence in the universe beyond our own intellects? It's not provable. It's not. So to me, something like that is in the realm of spirit, right? An archetype is in the realm of spirit because you can't test in a laboratory what the nature of an archetype is. It's a pattern, and either you experience it or you don't experience it.
I have never heard of it explained that way, but it is so interesting. I've never heard of thinking about it in different fields, right? Like, so, or different realms, I think you referred to it. It's not the same conversation we're having, right? Like,
Right.
you kind of have to step out of that system or out of that field and think about it, right, from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Very fascinating. And I think our listeners are going to relate, because I think almost in every episode we talk about the field So we keep getting deeper and deeper into the subject. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I loved that question, Shannon. And I, of course, love that response, Nick. Thank you so much. So you had mentioned, Nick, that you were talking about the brain as an organ of interpretation, and I loved that because it's just interpreting all the stuff. Well, it's doing a lot of stuff, but it's interpreting all the stuff that it's getting from the body, from the senses, right? And that made me think about how we need to decide then how we respond. If this is the interpreter, right? And it's getting the signal, the brain then needs to decide, okay, is this a signal or is this a story? Right? Am I going to tell a story about this, or where is that happening? Where is that happening in my brain then that so I get the signal from my body that I'm feeling really nervous, or this feels scary to me, or I'm overjoyed, or whatever it is. I get the signal, my brain is interpreting it. How does it then turn into the story? Or how can I change it from a story that I used to tell myself to a new story I want to tell myself?
Well, here's the thing. Once you say, I'm nervous, I'm scared, I'm excited, I'm happy, you're already telling a story
Right.
because emotions are stories. They're based in sensations, but you're interpreting a bunch of bodily sensations and the context in which those sensations are occurring and making a story of them. And when you name an emotion, that's a story.
Yes, it is.
It is.
I was always taught we're supposed to name our emotions and say them and express them
Yeah.
and put awareness really is the right? Like there is awareness. But there's
Yeah.
a contradiction. Help me understand.
Is there a contradiction? I'm not sure there is a contradiction there because we do want to name our emotions. It's useful to name our emotions, but it is also important to remember that when we do that, we are telling a story. And we do have the power to reinterpret and examine our stories and change them if they're not serving us well.
Great answer. That was because if it's not serving you, then you don't want to attach, right? It's
Right.
like an attachment that we make to these things.
Is there a story that could serve you better, right, in this particular context? And so again, what we're doing as brains, right? What is the brain doing? It's interpreting a lot of signals from the body and also from the context. And one of the interesting things about the brain is that, yes, it is an organ of interpretation and a story spinning organ and all sorts of other exciting things that the brain does. But its initial evolutionary purpose is as an organ of prediction. And so the brain makes predictions. And so there's are you familiar with allostatic theory?
No.
So there's this is sort of the current leading edge in neuroscience, is this idea of the allostatic function of the brain. So what that is as bodies, we have resources. We have certain amounts of energy available to us. There's neurotransmitters and hormones and such, and all sorts of regulatory systems within the body that determine where that energy goes. If you are in danger, you get that adrenaline surge in the legs, and because you need to run. And so the body allocates the energy there. Allocates, you eat a bunch of food, you got to allocate some resources to digestion. In a conversation, you're allocating resources to the capacity to do language. So we don't have unlimited resources. And so the brain is in charge of determining where to allocate the resources. And that's largely an unconscious process because the needs shift too quickly for us to think about it consciously. Nobody would survive infancy and toddlerhood if they had to decide how to, you know, how to allocate their energy in a given situation. So anyway, it also sometimes the needs for energy allocation and reallocation within the body shift faster than we can keep up with consciously. If we had brains that only reacted to what we had time to register consciously, we wouldn't have survived as a species. All right. No creature survives in the wild with, if you have to be like, oh, maybe that sound means something is behind me and I'd better check. Oh, now it's time to allocate resources to running. By that time you've been eaten. So so the brain is a predictive organ based on, okay, sudden noise, immediate allocation of energy based on this prediction. This could be danger. And so the resources are being allocated based on past experience. What does your brain think is likely to happen next? And what resources do you need to handle that?
It's almost like you have to beat the prediction. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you have to get
Yes.
ahead of that in a sense,
Yes,
in order
exactly.
to gain awareness and consciousness of what's going on.
Yes, exactly. Now you're seeing, yes, this is part of that game of mindfulness and self-transformation is, oh, okay, wow, I am predicting, I am predicting what is going to happen next unconsciously, and maybe that prediction is not serving me well. And so let's take that back to this whole emotion business, right? If you're in a situation, say you're, with a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner of some kind, right? And you're having an interaction and something happens that's, you find yourself suddenly getting upset, right? That's the story you're telling yourself is, you're feeling angry, you're feeling upset or something. So what's happening here, right? There's a prediction happening based on past experience that I'm in danger here, even if it's just emotional danger, right? There's a fight happening, or I can't trust this person, right? Based on all your past bad experiences of interactions that go bad and not being safe in relationships, or not being safe with parents or previous partners or whatever, right? There's a prediction happening. Oh no, we're going to need to fight. And it's happening at an unconscious level. And then this surge of energy happens, this allocation of energy towards the fight and towards your defensive patterns. And so if you're asked to name your emotion in that moment, you'd be like, I'm really upset. I'm really hurt. I'm really angry. Because based on the context, so here we are having a very charged conversation. I don't necessarily like what's being said, and I'm feeling this surge. I can feel the rising energy and blood flow and such. And so the story that most of us have learned to tell ourselves is, yeah, I'm angry, or I'm angry because I'm hurt, or because I'm scared, because of, you know, uh, because of what's happening in this relationship. Or if your person's really not very involved in their relational skills, it's because of what they're doing to me. But if we backtrack, we can say, okay, based on past experience, the brain is predicting based on what I'm feeling and what the context is that there's a fight coming or danger coming, a threat from my partner coming, something like that. And it's allocating the energy accordingly, which feels, oh, what I'm feeling is anger, and hurt and upset. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes a cycle. It builds on itself and escalates. But what if you say, okay, based on what I'm feeling in my body right now, my brain is probably predicting that there's trouble here. Is there really, or is that just a story that I picked out from past experience? And what am I feeling now? I'm feeling, maybe this surge of anger, this rising of energy, this maybe a shaking, a tension, something is happening there. We don't have to tell ourselves the story that this is anger and that therefore I must have a good reason to be angry. Right? We can say, okay, because of what what I'm unconsciously predicting based on past experience, because of what my brain is predicting, I now have this surge of energy. I don't need it because I don't want to fight. So let me either intentionally alter my embodiment in order to calm that energy back down, or let me use the energy some other way, be like, I'm really feeling instead of saying to your partner, I'm really feeling angry right now, say, I'm really feeling a surge of intense energy. This is a very energizing conversation. Maybe we could talk better if we were walking while we talked.
I have to write that one down.
Yeah.
That might help in some of my relationships, right?
And Shannon, do you know what I'm thinking about? Because we're both coaches,
Right.
public speaking,
Oh,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who has this adrenaline surge, this blood flow in their body, they're in what we like to call fight or flight because they know they have to go speak in front of 100 people.
Right.
It sounds like that's the same thing that's happening here.
And the story that they've been taught is that stage fright. But what if you say, no, it could be stage fright if you want to go with that story, but it's energy. What do you want it to be? What do you want to do with it? Do you want it to be stage fright, or do you want it to be excitement you can share with the audience?
this is yeah.
This is gold. This is gold, right, Shannon?
Yeah.
So are you like, is this related to visualization in any way?
So visualization is one, there's a lot of purposes, but one tool of visualization, or one use of visualization, is as a tool to shift your embodiment. So that can work, if as for me, with many, many years of Aikido practice and practice in other somatic practices, for me, I do it if I need to make a shift in my embodiment and how energy is allocated in my body. I just do it by feel. I just do it by intention. Oh, I'm going to ground in this way. I'm going to relax this. But for people who are not very practiced in that yet and are good visualizers, visualizing becomes a pathway to doing it. In other words, I need to relax and drop tensions that have accumulated in my body. At this point in my training, I can do that by feel. But for somebody who does not yet have the experience, to like feel, oh, there's muscle tension here, I'm going to release it. It can help to visualize. It can help to be like, okay, my coach is telling me, or my therapist is telling me, or my friend is telling me that my shoulders seem really tight and high. So I'm going to visualize this tightness that I can't quite feel into yet, but I'm going to visualize it as like this opaque colored light here. And I'm going to imagine it diffusing downward and settling downward. And that becomes a pathway into being able to feel it for people who haven't learned the feeling skill yet.
I will tell our audience one of the exercises we did together at BSL. So Nick comes with his partner and we learn these embodiment practices, and correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm not getting the language right. One of the things that we did was we were practicing grounding. Okay. And just like you said, with intention, like something that I kind of think in my head, I visualize and I think of my feet like roots of a tree, like
Mm-hmm.
all the way down into the core of the earth, and nothing can move me, right? Once I'm there. So that is a visualization, right? That's helping me ground myself. And I remember when we were doing this activity, Jen and I were talking, we are like, we can't wait to do this in our conflict resolution
Mm-hmm.
classes. So the interesting thing, and I'll tell my audience, in the beginning of working with you, I needed the visualization. I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I think grounded, and immediately I have this like feeling, this intent, this my feet sucking into the ground like I used to visualize, but I no longer need the visualization. So this
Exactly.
visualization is a tool to help
Yes.
overcome that, which is
Yes.
interesting. And it works. Look, I'm telling you right here. So I mean, these somatic exercises, these embodiment practices work.
Mm-hmm.
So my question, Nick, to help our audience understand, the basic question is, what is embodiment?
My definition is different from how some people use it, how it gets used in popular culture and how it gets used sometimes in, yoga classes or, or whatever. I'm really big on examining the language and the assumptions behind the language, and how we how we might want to shift our definitions to serve us better. Um, so this is perhaps not how everybody who uses the term embodiment understands it, but it's an understanding that I use and recommend. So again, we're bodies. So our embodiment is what we're doing. It's what we're being. And here's where I diverge from a lot of sort of popular culture and new age culture and stuff, because some people use the term embodiment to mean uh, deeply mindful of the body, awake to what is happening on a bodily level. But because I think we are bodies, I use the term a little differently. The thing is, if you use the term embodiment in the sense of like, oh, you're deeply attuned to to your body and what's happening in it. You're deeply present with it. If you use it that way, then suddenly we're in this strange sort of like ranking system, almost like back in the realm of like sort of patriarchal hierarchies where a person can be more embodied or less embodied, and then you get, oh, everybody looks up to the wise teacher figure who's so embodied, and it just becomes a little gross in my view. So I don't think that's terribly useful to think about. So um I would talk about where other people talk about that that deep bodily awareness and presence as being embodiment, I would say, a person is very mindfully embodied, or they're embodying a sense of presence in the moment or something like that. But this is the key thing. The distinction that I make is, because we're bodies, all of us are always fully embodied. By definition, you're embodied unless you're dead. You are a body. And so the useful question then shifts. The question is no longer, how embodied are you? The question is, what are you embodying? Which is essentially, what are you doing? What are you being? So what are you embodying in the moment? So that's my thesis, my position, is that we are always, every one of us is always embodying something. And so when you look at a person who seems very spaced out, they're not noticing what they're doing, and their attention is completely elsewhere, and they're just totally checked out. And um, uh, some people might say, "Oh, this person is not embodied, not deeply embodied." I would say, no, they're embodying dissociation. They're embodying their disconnection fully. And I always think about, well, what language is the most useful? How do we define this in a way that's useful, that where we can do something with it for purposes of what we're doing? I mean, the name of the game, right, is positive human transformation. So how is this definition useful for that purpose? And so to my mind, if we say everybody is always embodying something, and what that means is, you're always being something, you're always doing something, then the embodiment practice is a practice that can be used to intentionally change what you're embodying. It's a practice for having more agency over your embodiment.
This is a huge missing component in the way we talk about conscious communication, is embodiment, particularly the way you are defining embodiment, Nick, right, Shannon?
Yes, we have a whole new way to think about it now. So that's amazing. We are creating things here on the pod, which is awesome. We're creating conversation, bringing these issues to the surface, and trying to help people understand.
I love it.
We understand, right, Jen? Because we're learning. This whole show, I've learned like 20 things.
I know. I feel so selfish because it's really just about what I want to know and learn and practice.
Then you're sharing it, right?
Nick, we have to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests. Here's our question, and then I'll interpret it. If your vision of the world could be limitless, what would be your new bliss? Tell us what the perfect world would look like.
Here's the thing. I don't believe the world is perfectible. I think that it's now we're getting into my more, the more spiritual and Buddhist side of my practice.
Let's get into it.
I think it's the nature of being embodied, of being incarnate and alive, and living within linear time in a world full of other people, the finite nature of it all, and the necessary separation of our incarnating as individuals. I think that the world is not perfectible. It could certainly be better than it is. I think the world is infinitely improvable and never perfectible.
There you go. That's an answer we haven't heard yet, which is why I think it's so great. We ask all of our guests, what is one word or phrase that you're bringing with you from this conversation?
I have two things, and I can't decide which of these two things you're going to guess, but I know you're going to say one of them, Janet. So I'm going to wait for you to say it first, and then I'll say the other one.
You go first.
Okay. Mindful embodiment.
That was
Exactly. Okay. Should I leave that one for you?
no, you say it.
All right. Mindful embodiment. Honestly, Nick, you're like rocking our world here, because this is right before you came on. We were trying to work this out in our own brains, and you just did it for us. Thank you. Intentionally changing what we're embodying. We're always embodying something. We're always embodied. If you are a human on the planet, like you're saying, and you're breathing, you're embodied. So embodiment is general. Now I want to think about mindful embodiment and an embodiment practice, and how I can intentionally change what I am embodying. Thank you for that.
Lots to think about. I came up with mine. And it is the body mind as one.
I knew it.
The body mind. Jen and I are so funny. We call each other Janin, like, Jen and Shannon. Our minds have melded after this whole season. We think alike. We wear the same things. We can predict whatever, which each other is going to think, but it's definitely body mind. That is something I want to incorporate into my language, in my own head, and the way I converse, in my own head, but also with my clients. It's a good, this is a good way to help them understand exactly what we're talking about here.
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to pick intentionally changing our stories.
Love it.
That is crucial. One of the reasons why we do storytelling on this podcast is to kind of bring the issue of the stories we tell ourselves to the surface. So, again,
I know. Don't we love that Nick told us how we are telling stories and why we are telling stories? That is better than any given story he could have told us.
Yes. And we are forever grateful. Nick, thank you so much for this conversation. It has been enlightening. It has been a lot of things. And thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here. And until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, everyone, we have something really important to ask, right? Jen and Shannon are over here trying to save the world, and we need your help.
This is how you can help us. Go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, go to YouTube, and hit like and subscribe. And let us know what you think.
And here's the thing, we're building a community, and this is the first step.
We can't wait to see you there.